Hey guys, welcome back and thanks for joining another episode of the Life Podcast. I'm so pumped you're here, and this is like a year anniversary of the Life Podcast. We've been doing this since last August when quarantine hit, and I decided it was time to start a podcast. We're a year into this thing. It's been amazing, and because we're a year into this, I want to do a special giveaway with you guys. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, you got to follow me on Instagram, number one, because we're going to be giving away some hoodies. Going to give away some merch. It's going to be amazing. You want to be a part of it. So make sure you're following me. I don't even know my username, but if you're already here, you can probably find it. So we're going to get into today's episode, and it is a special one. I have with me somebody who I just recently met. His name is Spencer. Oh boy, remind me how to say your last name again, because I already
Nakamura.
forgot. There it is. Nakamura. Perfect, man. I am so excited you are here today. I actually found your content on TikTok, and I was like, I love what this guy is doing. I love the things he's saying. I got to get him on the podcast. So I reached out on Instagram, and you decided, you know what? I'll give this little guy with a podcast a chance. And now we're here recording this episode. So how you doing today, bro?
Dude, thank you so much for having me on, Austin. I'm doing great. It's it's an honor for me to be on here. This is actually the first. It's cool that this is a 1 year anniversary for you. I had no idea.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, this is the first podcast that I actually am a guest on, and so I just want to thank you for having me on. I think your podcast is awesome. I think your ministry is awesome. Your TikToks with your daughter are awesome.
Yeah,
so,
thanks, bro.
I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, I think we're going to have some great conversation today, man. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do? Give the people kind of an idea of who you are, man.
Yeah, so I currently host my own podcast. It's called The Future Is Now Podcast, Living with Passion and Purpose as a Christian Leader. So previously, I worked in ministry. I'm 26 years old right now, so I worked 5 years in ministry beforehand at a church here in Washington State, and felt just like the call to transition off of that. And so now I'm doing podcasting, and I'm building kind of a business that develops leaders, Christian leaders in business and ministry. And so, yeah, we are in the very beginning stages of it. So it's an exciting season. But I made that transition about 6 months ago. I'm kind of in the middle of COVID, a little bit later than you, but I feel like kind of COVID was that season for a lot of people to start new things and transitions. So just been doing that the last 6 months and having the time of my life with it.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I've listened to your podcast. I love it. I listened to some of the sermons you preached on your YouTube channel. I love those. I just listened to the one today, actually. You were telling a story where y'all were driving backwards down some road and you were getting wild. Anyway, funny story. I love it. It was amazing. But yeah, let's hop into today's episode, man. We're going to talk about a few things today, and hopefully this conversation takes us a few other places too. I'm sure it will, because I like to talk. Number one, I want to talk about this idea of loving our neighbor. And I've done actually an episode before. I literally called it Loving Your Neighbor in 2020, How to Love Your Neighbor in 2020. But I think we're going to tackle it from a different angle today, because the culture that we live in, and this isn't something that we talked about on the last episode I did this on, but the culture we live in today says that love, like on TikTok, on social media, love looks like calling people out, being disrespectful, publicly disagreeing with people's political views, with their, and this is among Christians. I'm not even talking about Christians to other people. I'm talking about how can we as Christians not only love our neighbors who aren't, Christians, this is a Christian podcast, but how can Christians love Christians who think differently than I do, who might look differently than I do, who might be on the opposite side of the political spectrum than I am? Like, what does that even look like? And I want to explore how the Bible actually says we can live this out. So that's one thing we're going to talk about today. And number two, I want to talk about accountability, because I think that a lot of the problems we experience as Christians, like having trouble loving our neighbor, comes from a lack of accountability. And many other problems we might experience in Christian culture as well stem from a lack of accountability in our lives. So that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. And man, I'm excited. Are you ready for this or what?
I'm ready, man. I'm ready to tackle it all.
Let's do it. And before we do it, I gotta plug this, because you guys got to go check out Spencer's podcast. The Future Is Now. It is amazing. If you want to grow as a leader, from what I've listened to, I've only listened to a few episodes, but if you want to grow, you got to go check it out, because it is some seriously good content. So with that being said, let's hop into it, and I will ask the first question. So what do you see in the world today when it comes to Christians loving people around them? Like, what have you seen on your social media out in the real world? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and you've probably experienced this too, but it's interesting to see the generational changes, right? Because you have TikTok now, which is this huge platform, and I feel like, how old are you?
I'm 23.
23. Okay. So I feel like me and you, for the most part, we grew up with like Instagram, we grew up with like YouTube and like the developing stages of that. But now you see this generation growing up on TikTok. And it's so interesting because there is such a crazy difference in like just the demographic and like the content and whatever. And we also live in a time where it's very polarizing. I was talking to this with one of my friends the other day. I'm like, it's crazy because I feel like 20 years ago, you could like you speak of a Christian household, right? 20 years ago, your mom could vote like Democrat and then your dad could have voted Republican and it was like wasn't that big of a deal like 20 years ago. It was just like, hey, you have that, you have that, but it's funny cuz that would never ever happen today. Like it would just never happen. And so it's because we live in such a more polarizing time. And with that, I feel like Christians, when it comes to loving one another, it's almost divided us. And it's really sad because I see, at least on TikTok, and I'm sure you see this as well. It's like my TikTok is primarily like Christian funny content, right? I mean, it's just like a little bit humorous, whatever. And it's like I actually said this the other day. I'm like the biggest haters I get on my TikTok are other Christians. I'm like, what are we talking about here? And so I think the biggest problem we're facing today as Christians is we're not unified as a body, and therefore nothing about the church and Christianity is attractive to the world because they see us and they see us fighting each other. And it's like, why would I even? It's like observing a toxic relationship like in public. You're like, ooh, I would not want to be a part of that. And I feel like right now, that's what Christians are presenting to the world is like we're so bent on fighting each other on things that they matter, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not the most important thing in the world. And because of that, I feel like it's making a more polarizing, dividing view, at least on Christianity itself.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Some conversations that I've been having with, my coworkers, the other pastors on staff here at my church. What we've done is we've really politicized things that were never meant to be politicized in the first place. For example, like let's just be relevant here. Masks, vaccines. These things were not meant to be politicized. But now we can't even love the people around us because they believe differently about us because we've politicized a mask. If you want to wear a mask, you're on the left side. If you don't want to wear a mask, you're on the right side. And because that's where you stand, and because we politicize that thing, I can no longer love you like I should. And I think that's been a lot of the problem is we've allowed people's beliefs, we've allowed the way that people think to dictate who they are, when in reality that they are far more than their political stance, they're far more than what they believe, they're far more than if they wear a mask or not, which seems to be the separating thing these days. If you're vaxxed, if you're masked up, whatever, like those are the things that we're looking for. And to me, it just feels so shallow. And man, let me ask you this: why do you think that this is a problem we're experiencing today? Like, why do you think it's so hard for us to love our neighbor? Like you see it on TikTok, you see it on Instagram, you see it in real life, but like, why is this a problem for us?
I think honestly, when it comes down to it, I feel like it's just a big identity problem and it's an idol problem. And what I mean by that is our identity should be in Jesus. That should be our identity, right? But what happens is when it's not, our identity is always found in something. And so we live in a time today, and I am a very pro social media like person. I love Instagram. I love YouTube. I love social media. I think it's like an incredible platform. I mean, we both use it and utilize it. So I'm not hating on it. I'm just saying that if we're not careful, we have all these things that are being thrown our way. And because of that, if our identity isn't in Jesus, if our identity isn't in our faith, then our identity is going to be in what we're consuming. And, social media does a great job of it. I mean, like TikTok, it's like the For You page. It's like a joke because everybody was like, how does TikTok understand me better than I understand myself, right?
Yeah,
Like I'll
seriously.
be scrolling and all of a sudden this video, this construction, which I don't do construction, but this construction video will come up and I find it the most entertaining thing in the world. And I'm like, how did TikTok know that I would like this before I even like this, right?
Right,
But
right.
what they do is they take your preferences and they take your interests and they start flooding you with things. And that's why I feel like you have this nation that's so divided, is because we're getting fed two completely different things. And the more our ideologies of it get built up, the harder it is to come to common ground. Versus, in my opinion, it's like, hey, whatever opinion you have on masks, whatever opinion you have on vaccines, like if you're a Christian, if you're a faith follower, our common ground in our identity is in Jesus. Oh, we both love Jesus. Like we both feel like he died on the cross for us. We both have a mission to spread his love to the world. Okay, cool. Well, that means that you're my brother. We can collaborate. We can talk, although there are these disagreements, versus people that are saying, hey, if you don't think the way that I think about these ancillary topics, then you don't actually love Jesus, which is like completely backwards. So I feel like, I don't know about you, but I feel like part of it is a big identity problem of like, where are people forming their alliances with?
Yeah. No, that's really good. I really love that analogy that you bring up because a lot of us, we are seeing a lot of the same content on social media. I mean, whatever it is, I post baby content. Like I post videos with
Yeah,
my
yeah.
daughter. So I get all these baby videos and I'll go talk to somebody and I'll be like, "Bro, do you know who that there's like this other I don't know if you've seen Chris and Marley, the Yeet baby. I don't know if you've seen them on TikTok.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'll go talk to somebody. I'll be like, "Hey, have you seen these guys' videos?" And they'll be like, "No." And I'll be like, "How? That's all I see on my For You page." Because our For You pages and the things that we're consuming are so totally different. And they lead us to a place of believing everything that I'm seeing must be true. There is nothing outside of this circle that I am seeing that can even exist or be true. So, like you said, we've built up two totally different ideologies, and those ideologies have become our identity. They've become who we said. So as soon as somebody attacks our ideology, we're like, oh, they're actually attacking me, even though they're not. We just so closely associated with those things in our lives, and it's just become an epidemic. So now our ideologies are being attacked. We don't feel like we're loved. We don't have to love somebody because they think differently than I do, because what they believe is false. Or there's all sorts of false narratives and things out there that people are allowing to infiltrate their minds, I think. And you dropped a podcast episode, or maybe it was the sermon I was listening to, but it was all about the battle in your mind. And I think that this really does come down to, are we going to choose to let silly, minuscule things separate us and stop us from loving people? Or are we going to allow these things to really get in our way when they shouldn't? Maybe speak to that a little bit if you can, this idea of choosing to love somebody versus, choosing to blatantly disrespect or blatantly call out or whatever. I don't know if you can say anything to that.
Yeah, no, I think it's very, and I've noticed this a lot with like the younger generation. It's like, and again, I mean, we're always going back to TikTok, but let's just say social media in general. They'll say truth. They'll say something that isn't necessarily wrong, but it's not loving, right? And when I think about loving my neighbor, when I think about that, I automatically go to Mark 12, chapter 12, verse 30 and 31. So like Jesus, it's when one of the scribes, they ask Jesus, they're like, okay, so what's the most important command? And Jesus says, okay, well, number one is obviously love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, strength. That's number one. And he says, number two is to love your neighbor as yourself. And so part of that has to do with our love for others isn't true love if we're automatically not first in alignment with loving the Lord.
Absolutely.
And loving the Lord is obeying his commands, right? So I think that people get misconstrued because they're saying, as long as I am saying the right things on social media and I'm calling out people, like that is love. Like love is truth. It's called harsh love. It's like tough love. And all these people are like, it's not loving to condone or to advocate for somebody that's in the wrong, which I agree with. But, I, in, I always try and look at Jesus' life, right? I'm like, okay, well, how did he love people? And honestly, it's cool because whenever you see Jesus speak truth to people, whenever you see him, heal, whenever like the woman that was caught in adultery, it's not like he was looking at her and saying, hey, you were in the wrong. Like, this is right. What he did is he understood her. He stood up for her, right? Then everybody goes away and it wasn't public anymore. And then privately, he's like, hey, look it, nobody hears condemning you. Now go and sin no more.
So
The
good.
truth was there, but he walked with her first. Or like Zacchaeus, if you don't know, if you're listening, you don't know the story of Zacchaeus. He's like this tax guy, and he's doing some shady deals, and he's not up to standard with it. But Jesus calls him down from a tree. He was up on a tree looking at Jesus in the crowd. Jesus sees him, calls him down. He's like, hey, I'm going to come to your house. And then all of a sudden Zacchaeus gets saved and he turns his lifestyle. So it's like, I feel like we can't expect people to hear our truth and be changed by it if we're not first willing to actually like really care and love them and understand where they're coming from. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, there's truth and there's love. And I think it's in 1 Corinthians 13 that's basically talking about if I speak in tongues and the voice of the angels, but I don't have love, I'm nothing but a clanging cymbal. And so it's like, I think that's why Christians, are on their platforms thinking that they're preaching love when everybody else is scrolling saying, wow, you are so annoying. It's literally like someone banging a drum, like, get out of my face. It's because we're not coming with truth and love. And we actually had a pastor speak this message at our church this last weekend. Super convicting to me to be like, we need truth and we need love. Like it's one of the same. And I just feel like the world right now, there's tons of difference in the world. And I think like difference is such an amazing opportunity for us as believers because without difference and without controversy in the world, nobody really cares about the church, right? It's like small groups are thriving, churches are thriving. Like if you go to church, that's cool. If you don't, that's cool. Like nobody really cares. But when there's difference and when there's hardship, when there's things happening in the Middle East, when there's, all this stuff happening in our nation, Christians now have the opportunity to be unified and for people to look at Christianity and be like, wow, look at them. They're so different. There's a tangible love there that I want to be a part of. But I feel like we're kind of just dropping the ball because we're just fighting and squabbling with one another about things that don't really matter.
Yeah, dude, you said it. I mean, you articulated that very well, I think. What would you say, having said that and having kind of identified, why it is that we're doing this or what it's like, what are some practical tips you can give to help Christians really love people in their lives? People that are Christians, people that are not Christians. How can we do that in such a divided time?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a process, and it's definitely like I journey with it every single day.
Yeah, nobody's
Because
perfect.
I'll see, anybody will see a post and be like, "Dude, you're an idiot." Like I don't agree with you, like in your
Yeah.
head. But you just have to understand what, like internally, I feel like we all have to take inventory and ask ourselves, what is the sword that I'm willing to fall on? What is because you can't fall on every sword. Then you're going to be like, you're going to have a million wounds inside of you and nobody is capable of that. Like the swords that I fall on isn't whether you're wearing your mask or not. If somebody tells me, hey, I'm going to wear my mask, I'm like, cool, man, you do you. Don't matter to me. If someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm getting the vaccine, okay, cool, you do you. Yeah, like you do you. I'm not going to have an issue with that. The sword that I fall on, is at least, okay, let's go to the same example, masks and vaccines. Like the sword that I'm falling on is when people try and tell me to do it. Cause that's like my personal liberty. That's a sword I'm willing to fall on. With faith, it's like, oh, you don't believe in, you don't believe in this aspect of scripture or this aspect of scripture. As long as you understand and believe with me the things that I'm willing to fall on, which is like the doctrine of the Trinity, the doctrine of salvation, the doctrine like Jesus was God on earth, died for our sins. Those are the things that I'm willing to fall on. I'm not willing to fall on tattoos. Right? Like I'm not willing to fall on saying grace every meal for like prayer. Like those are the things like if you have a different preference than me, then I'm down to have a discussion about it. Like, cause I want to understand more about your point of view, but it's not a sword I'm willing to fall on to say, hey, I'm against you at this point because you think those things. So I feel like we live in a very sensitive culture and emotionally, which it's not always a bad thing. But I think at times we have to understand that we don't have to combat and disagree and publicly post about all the things that we're disagreeing about. It's like what really matters in the end.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's really good. I love that you brought that up because what's happening on social media, what's happening in person when you talk to people is we are being separated by, things that aren't essential to the faith. We're being separated by, I don't know.
Right.
I've heard a lot of people who disagree on what the end times is going to look like. There's a rapture, there's no
Right.
rapture. It's going to be post-trib, pre-trib, whatever term you want to use, and we're
Yes.
allowing that to separate us when in reality, that doesn't necessarily change the way that Jesus is calling me to live my life right now. There is still an urgency to preach the gospel because people will go to hell if they die. So the end times is going to come at some point, whenever that is. So I'm not going to let that be a reason that I'm going to be divided from somebody. I mean, I think we can see it in history too. We've allowed little things to divide us, and now we have 18,000 different denominations in the church that, like, for example, I'm a part of an Assemblies of God church, but an Assemblies of God church looks very similar to the Church of God, which looks very similar to the Vineyard, which they're separated by minor details. And now there's churches down the road that people like that is very easy to say, yeah, I don't go over there because they're a Vineyard church, or I don't go over there because they're a Baptist church. When I mean, there are some of these that have bigger separations, but for the most part, we're not disagreeing on the essentials of the faith. We're all still under this umbrella of Christian, and I believe I'm going to see all my Baptist brothers in heaven. I don't even like saying brothers. I feel super Christian when I say things like that,
Yeah,
but
I know.
I'm going to see all those people in heaven one day. You know what I mean? So, um, I love what you said. We need to just choose and decide which swords we're going to fall on and which ones we're not, because we've allowed we've allowed separation and division over small things that are so minuscule. I think about my own daughter actually, because her and I get into power struggles all the time because I'm kind of a control freak, and if you know anything about 2-year olds, they love to push the boundaries. And um, for example, when we first had Ellie, my daughter, I loved a clean house. Like, I didn't want fingerprints anywhere. Like, I didn't want food spilled all over the place. I had this nice white chair that I loved. This is a little rocking chair. It's all white and cushiony and amazing. And when Ellie gets to the age where she can walk around and pull herself up on things, she's got food and nasty stuff all over her hands, and she's grabbing this white chair, and I'm just like, dear God, like this,
Yeah.
like I could let something little like that determine how I treat my daughter, or I could realize, hey, in light of the bigger picture, this is not something to freak out about and scar her for life because I'm angry about a chair. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I love the way you put it. I love the way you said that. I think it was amazing. Um, Anything else to add to that conversation about loving our neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like kind of on the same vein of like God will give not give us, but through, our relationship with the Lord, we should have an opinion on everything. Right? We should, because it's the cliche old saying, like, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything, right? So you should have an opinion on everything, but your opinion on everything isn't meant for everyone. And so it's just, yeah, like take inventory. I take inventory of my life and like, what am I willing to really, I mean, honestly, in the end, die for? And that's another thing. I mean, like, people are literally dying for their faith, and we're over here squabbling about, one chapter of the Bible and it's dividing. So it's just gaining perspective in that light of like, now is a time where the church needs to be unified, especially like in America, the Western church, because like there's bigger battles at hand.
Yeah, I'm with that 100%. Switching gears a little bit, as I kind of mentioned before, there's this idea that accountability or lack thereof has kind of led Christian culture to experience a lot of the problems and struggles that we're experiencing, whether that be loving our neighbor or other problems. Let me ask you this: what's the importance? We'll start off with this question. What's the importance of accountability in our lives?
Wow. I mean, accountability is I think it's everything, honestly. I think, your ceiling in terms of success, your faith, I mean, it's all dependent on the amount of accountability you have in your life. I mean, you look at history, you look at the Bible, everybody needs accountability because I'm sure everybody that's listening can resonate, but like sometimes you're like you are your own worst enemy. And that's the part of scripture where it's like, okay, God has made strong in our weakness. It's like, are we willing to admit that we are really weak people? Like, and in the end, I think it's accountability sometimes has this like, I don't know, like people don't like hearing it. Like you hear the word
Right.
accountability and you're like, ugh, gross.
I need an
But
accountability
accountability,
partner.
yeah, exactly. But accountability is it's not just like a positive, it's not just healthy, it's necessary. And because you need people alongside of you that a will call you out when you're in the wrong, will also lift you up, when you're feeling discouraged. And I kind of think about the verse in First John when it talks about how the enemy is like a roaring lion, waiting to devour somebody. And that really resonates with me because it's just like a lot of people think about a lion devouring, right? A lion hunting. And, of course, it's like this great big beast, it's the king of the jungle, whatever. That's what a lion is. But it's interesting because, like, the way that lions hunt is not, they will not take out the strongest of the herd. What they'll do is they'll chase, and there's always the weakest or the oldest or the most fragile that fall behind the herd. And then the lions, they're not about the most work, they're about how to do things the easiest with the most efficiency. And so I just feel like in terms of accountability, like the enemy of our soul, the devil, like obviously he wants to derail all of us. But oftentimes he takes those that don't have accountability. And what happens is when we don't have accountability, inevitably we'll slip up and he'll just wait. And it's when we're isolated alone that really we get damaged and we get, we mess up and we make mistakes and we have these huge blow up moments. And so, accountability is just something that it's not always fun, but it's so necessary because our view in life is so narrow. However, open-minded you think you are, you might be the most open-minded person in the world, but that doesn't mean you still have blind spots in our lives. And so, in my life, it's like in your life, in all of our lives, like we need people side by side that knows us, that cares for us, and because of that, they'll be able to tell us and help us and guide us in terms of like what we want to accomplish and making sure that we're staying on the path.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Why do you think, because accountability is a huge topic in church. I mean, if you go to church, you're like, got to get an accountability partner, I've been struggling this week or whatever it is. And I agree. There's a lot of connotations to that word, but I agree with you. I think it is absolutely necessary to have accountability in our lives. But why do you think it is that people don't have accountability? Why do they tend to shy away from it?
Yeah, I think because it's uncomfortable to admit when you need help. It's uncomfortable to admit when, something's not going right with you and to open up and to tell somebody because honestly, there are so many thoughts that go through our head a day, like 50,000 thoughts, and a lot of those thoughts aren't real until we speak it, right? So it's like, say I'm driving and I get frustrated and I yell at this guy, and driving off, like I can have that conviction in my head of like, I probably shouldn't have done that. But it's easy for me to kind of justify it and for it to go away. But the second like you actually say something, it becomes a lot more real. And I feel like it causes us to actually face issues rather than hide from issues. Because a lot of us, I mean, like Adam and Eve at the very, very beginning, like hiding is our nature when we make mistakes. And it's so easy to hide. It really is. Like, it's so easy to not tell people about the things that we're going through. So I feel like, I don't know, maybe you have something to say to it too, but I feel like that's one of the reasons is because we don't like things being actually real and facing issues as small as they may be.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. And as somebody who has experienced, having to humble myself and ask for accountability and, experience that in life, it is not comfortable. It is probably one of the more difficult things that we can do, because we don't want to be known intimately like that. We don't want people to think that we have these issues, like you said. And I think one thing that comes along in the conversation of accountability is this idea of humility. You have to be willing to put yourself out there ultimately, and suck up whatever amount of pride you might be having and say, you know what, even on my best days, I'm still never going to be able to live this thing out on my own. And so it's okay to say I need help. in this area. I struggle over here. I struggle loving my neighbor. Maybe I need to be off social media for a few days. That takes some humility to do that because you're gonna miss out on things. Your friends might be like, "That's a dumb thing for you to do. Get off social media." Whatever. But like when you can say, "I have a level of humility," and really live that out, I think it'll make being vulnerable and having accountability just a little bit easier because pride is what blocks us from having accountability. Pride says, you know what, you don't need accountability. This day's going to be over soon. You'll start a new one. You'll be fine. Tomorrow's a new day, Austin. You'll be fine tomorrow. And that's the constant lie that we keep hearing in our minds when we know we need accountability. The enemy is always trying to get us, like you said, isolated at the back of the pack where nobody can reach out to us and help us, thinking that we're the only ones experiencing the problems we're experiencing. But what I found, and I've heard other people say this in their journeys of being vulnerable and having accountability, is that the moment I tell somebody what it is I'm struggling in my life is the same moment I realize I'm not alone. It's the same moment I realize that, you know what? I am not the only person on this earth experiencing that problem. And there is liberation in that moment when you're like, whoa, you actually struggle with that too. When I dropped an episode and just kind of shared my experience with getting set free from pornography, which is something that runs rampant in the Christian culture today. I had people from high school reach out to me, both females and males alike, and they're like, I was like a good kid in high school. Like everybody's like, oh, Austin, he's the goody two shoes, like could never do anything wrong. And when I had people reach out to me, they're like, Austin, I never knew like that was something you struggled with, number one. But number two, I'm struggling with it too. Wow. All because I was willing to humble myself, share my problems, and let other people know that they're also not alone in their struggles. So um, I think humility is absolutely necessary in your journey of accountability. Um, what are some of the biggest problems you see to kind of keep this conversation moving forward a little bit? What are some of the biggest problems you see in Christian culture and the Christian life due to the lack of accountability that we have?
I honestly I feel like because of the lack of accountability, at least in in Christians today, I feel like it's kind of on the same idea of what we've already been talking about, but I feel like it's just led to people thinking that their opinion and their worldview and their ideas are correct off the bat. And I think it's just a very dangerous place to be. And you see that in the kind of like how, at least in America today, you have all these super wacko, weird like interpretations of scripture and the way, like people that are neglecting any type of accountability in their life. And all of a sudden it's no longer a faith of conviction. It's a faith in obedience, but it's a faith of feeling. And that's just kind of what I've observed of like when I lose accountability in my life, all of a sudden I am the smartest person in the room. All of a sudden, like I'm the most successful person, like I have the best ideas, right? But whenever I have accountability, it grounds you. It makes you, it makes you human again of like, okay, no, there are, people around me that know better than me that I should listen to. And I think that's the heart of it too, is like the ability to listen to somebody else and take criticism or critiquing from somebody else. Because you shouldn't take it from everybody, obviously, but people that you trust, that you choose to be accountable to. And I think that's another big thing about accountability is I'm not asking for the whole world to be accountable to me. Like that'll just like make you be the most I'll do everything to appease everybody type of person. Like you should have like maybe like, honestly, two, three, maybe people that are really close to you besides like, your spouse or somebody, but like two to three people that you trust that it's like their opinion weighs super heavy in my life. They're my accountability. Because when you're able to accept criticism, when you're able to actually hear, oh, I'm wrong, I did this and it wasn't correct, I feel like it helps ground us. So the issue, honestly, that I feel like we're facing as a nation is kind of like this idol of ourselves and the idol of feeling, and that becoming our truth. I don't know about you. What do you think?
Yeah, man. I actually just preached this last weekend, and the message I preached was I titled it "In My Feelings," and the idea of it, shout out Drake. The idea of it was was that this growing notion, and it's been this way for probably 5, 10 years now, but this growing notion that my feelings are fact, my feelings are truth. Whatever I feel must therefore be true. Because we've been in such a sensitive culture, we've now validated people's feelings to the point that as soon as they experience it or feel it, no matter if it lines up with scripture or what other people say, I feel it, I do it, it's true. And I think that's so fickle because the example I shared on Sunday, you should go and listen to that message. It'll be on my YouTube channel soon. Um, Not to plug myself,
But
but
go watch it.
yeah, there you go. The It's so fickle because I think of things like if I followed my feelings all the time, this is what my life would look like. I would be eating at McDonald's 5 times a day because it's way easier than cooking. I feel like going to McDonald's today. I want a Big Mac. I don't feel like meal prepping. I don't feel like cooking. I also don't feel like getting up early in the mornings to go to work. So I would never go to work. So not only would I be fat, but I'd be broke because I just don't feel like doing all those things. Truthfully, I don't always feel like treating people with respect. And because I don't feel like it, I'm not going to because that's my truth now. And there's just a whole road you can go down if we allow our feelings to lead us in this. And what accountability does is it shows us that your feelings aren't true. Sometimes they are. I think, sometimes God does put desires and things in our hearts like, oh, that actually is a kingdom minded thing that I want to do. And I think those things are great. But more often than not, the Bible tells us that the heart is deceitful. That's a quoted verse when we talk about feelings, right? Jeremiah, I think it's like 13:9, or I don't even know. Don't take my word for that.
Hmm.
But
One of them.
the heart is deceitful. Who can understand it? And the answer to that question is not us. We cannot understand it. We will never be able to interpret its meanings. The only one who can is Jesus. So that's why the Bible tells us to take every thought that we have captive and submit it to the obedience of Jesus, because the one who made us is the only one who could understand us and tell us what is happening inside of us. So when we're led by feelings, we are led to believe that my narrative is the only true one. And if I don't have accountability in my life, that's all I'm ever going to believe because nobody's going to tell me different. And that's why we see comments on TikTok and Instagram like, hey, by the way, you're wrong and you're an idiot because you think like that. Because they don't have accountability and they don't have somebody telling them, listen, bro, just because you felt it and heard that one time doesn't mean it's true. And I mean, I agree with you. That is probably one of the biggest problems I think that we're facing, at least I think most of this conversation revolves around the Western church. I don't know much about the other parts of the world because I'm not living there.
Yeah.
But this is
Right.
definitely what I'm experiencing in my life, in my ministry, as I do a podcast, as I am on social media. And it sounds like you're experiencing very similar things as well. So yeah, man, any final thoughts to add on that about the importance of accountability or anything that I just said?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least like one of the last things is it can be really intimidating to find accountability in your life. I feel like it's kind of like, especially those people that are like, I don't have a big circle around me. Who would I ask? But and don't it doesn't have to be weird, you know. So I would just encourage like start small and work your way up. You know, you don't have to like sit somebody down and tell them everything about yourself and like expect someone to be your counselor or your therapist. But like all it takes is one conversation. And I guarantee you, I've never had a conversation with somebody I was close to where they were like, hey, I want to get better at this. Can you help me? And me be like, wow, you're so weird for asking that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like have a conversation, take someone out to coffee, just hang out with somebody, and just if there's an area of your life where you feel like you need accountability, just ask and start small. And also ask people around you, like your good close friends, like what areas you're lacking in. And that is accountability as well. It's like accountability isn't always, hey, I need this other person to come to me, you know, every week and tell me this and this and this. It's me going to, you know, it's me going to my friends and saying, hey, is like have I done anything that's like been like, maybe you shouldn't do that, and open up the dialogue yourself. So, but again, I love what you were saying. Just it's all about humility. It's all about humbling yourself. So just humble yourself and start the first conversation. I promise you, you are going to be able to expand your influence, expand your character, expand everything that God wants you to when you have somebody else that's able to speak into your life.
Yeah, I think what you said was really good. That we need people around us, we need relationships. But I want to go back to what you said about the pack and the lion. That people that are isolated are the ones who get attacked from the enemy. And I think we live, and this has to do with accountability. I'll bring this back to what you were saying. But we live in a time where I really feel like, not to be super hyper spiritual or whatever, but the enemy has allowed so many people to be isolated, and we live in a time where people do not have deep connections with other real people. They have deep connections with this thing in their pocket, and that's about it. They don't have a real relationship to even start to ask for accountability. And that's not, if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, I really don't have anybody close to me. I don't have a real deep relationship in my life. I don't say that to shame you. I say that to tell you that's a reality for a lot of people. And if you were to simply reach out to probably somebody else in your life that you might work with, you might go to church with, they might even be experiencing the same thing and might be looking for the same deep, intimate connection that you're looking for. Because, like you said, Satan will attack those ones who are isolated, who are by themselves. Because when you're by yourself, you're weak. You will never do it on your own. You'll never live up to the expectations that you have for yourself. And yeah, there's just a lack, especially with COVID. And if you were a single person during COVID, living by yourself, and all of a sudden now you have to work from home, you're not seeing anybody in a day if you adhere to that, the social distancing and the quarantine or whatever. But I can't imagine how many people felt lonely, felt like there was nobody there for them, and they could never have accountability if they don't have real connections with other people. So I would just highly encourage you, get plugged in somewhere, whether that's at church and you need to get, if you need to get to serving in a certain area of ministry, that's a great way to build relationships with people. At your job, that's a great way to build relationships with people. I don't know, wherever people are, go there, find somebody, build a relationship with them, because there is nothing more important that you could probably do in your Christian walk than surround yourself with people who are kingdom minded ultimately. So yeah, man, you've said some really great things today. I'm super excited to put this episode out there. Do you got any final thoughts for the episode?
My only final thought for the episode is that everybody should subscribe to this podcast and go subscribe to Austin's YouTube channel, because I really do believe in what you're doing and the message that you're giving, and it's very practical. It's very easy to consume, and so yeah, I just we've just met each other, like you said, but man, I've been loving what you've been putting out. So
Thanks,
just
man.
keep going with it, and I'm honored to be on here.
Yeah, thank you, bro. I appreciate it. If you've made it this long in the episode, you might as well just subscribe. You might as well, like or review. The reviews really help on Apple Podcasts. So go ahead, leave a rating, leave a review. But honestly, Spencer, this has been a great conversation. I'm super excited to put this out there for people. And you plugged me, so now I got to plug you real quick. You got to subscribe to the Future Is Now podcast. Check out what he's doing. It's what, snleadership.com. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
there you go. I don't know how I knew that off the top of my head, but
I
if
know
you want to
that's
know more about
respect.
what Spencer's doing, we can put it down in the show notes. You can go check it out, but he's doing some amazing things. If you want to grow in your life, you got to check it out, because you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. So, with all that being said, we're going to conclude this episode. Spencer, thanks again for hopping on. It was a privilege.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We'll see you guys next time.